Mini episode 625 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Sportsology, delivering unconventional columns and webcasts about sports, TV, music, movies, and more. Follow them on the web at sportsology.com.
The FDH Lounge. You want to schedule your life around it.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst the late-night drizzle. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this mini episode of the FDH Lounge. I'm FDH Managing Partner Rick Morris, and we're doing a segment today we've been looking forward to doing for a while. Gerry Clarke from Fox Sports Radio Chicago. We're going to be talking some Blackhawks, getting into that with them. Gerry, pleasure to have you on the show today. How are you, sir?
Well, fine, Rick. Thanks a lot. It's good to be on. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's great to get to talk to you. In terms of economics, with the Blackhawks, Gerry, it's an interesting thing that, as has been the case in the past, the salary cap wrecking some havoc on a Stanley Cup champion, and Brendan Saad, of course, going to Columbus, and some other moves that had to be made. But early on, it doesn't seem as though any of those issues are really plaguing the team as much as issues with the guys who are still around. Now with Duncan Kirk needing knee surgery, the ongoing controversy, and perhaps worse with Patrick Kane, it seems like things that could not have been foreseen relative to the salary cap are more of a problem to the Blackhawks than the economic issues were coming off of that season. Does that seem to be right?
I would believe that wholeheartedly. You know, it's expensive to win, and the longer you win, the more expensive it becomes. Just look at the Steinbrenners. And if there's some point in time when you're drawing 27,000 people a game, you can't get any more people than that in the stadium. So we're going to get you don't get so much money for TV, and they're on cable now, so it's not like they're killing it on TV. They're on Comcast, which is an underrated station. So how do the Blackhawks maximize revenues? Where are the other revenue streams to keep paying these players? Do you go into personal services contracts like Old Man Jones did with Deion Sanders years ago? I don't know what they do. Problems are going to arise. Patrick Kane has always been one of those guys, too, that's always been a little bit on the Theo Fleury side. If anybody recollects Theo Fleury, it's the same guy, reincarnate. Young man, lots of talent, small of stature, and they drink a lot. And it's too bad that happens, but it happens in sports. It's not just Kane. There's a number of other fellows, I'm sure, that have some issues. But, that comes into a good, stoic, great coach. Quenneville's been down this road before. He's very Phil Jackson-like. If you can correlate basketball to hockey, Quenneville is a quiet leader. I think Kane will be okay. The Blackhawks, when they lost Dustin Byfuglien, I remember when he went to Atlanta, and gee whiz, we thought that the world was going to end, and we were a little bit flat a year or two after that. But the Blackhawks bounced back because they traded their guys for some good talents. I like Stan Bowman. I think he's a good GM. I think his father taught him well. He seems to get the most. There's a time they're going to have to let players go, and you can't help it. Sam was a good player, but, the contract negotiations broke down, and then he went to Columbus. Are they 0-7? 0-7? I think they're
off to a horrible start. Yeah, I think that's the start. They got off to that horrible start. Yeah.
Okay, so people just think about money. If I'm a player, I want to be part of a winner, not just 1 year. But, Chicago here with the Blackhawks, they got kind of almost like a quasi-dynasty going. They're a very competitive team. He should have stayed, should have taken their money, win some games, and then the next time he comes out to be a free agent, he can pick and choose where he goes. I don't think I would never have taken Columbus over the Blackhawks, but it's all about money, right? The salary cap. The Blackhawks seem to bump heads with the salary cap every season. That's always the seasons that they win the Stanley Cup. That's the one that seems to be the most problematic, but it's expensive to win. The Bulls went through it with Michael Jordan. So here in Chicago, we're okay with that. I'm fine with it. I understand it completely. And I wonder, 3-3, anything can happen. When Duncan Keith comes off, the DL, he'll be a little rusty. We hope that these two youngsters they got Victor, or whatever his name is. I can't think of his name, a Russian player. They got these two young men, Van Driezik or something like that. They got two guys who are very young players. They only have 33 games of professional experience between them. Can they do it? Can they carry the load for a great defenseman? We'll see. We'll see. I that's what I love about hockey, because you never know what the next 10 games are going to bring you.
That's right.
Yeah, you never know. And the Islanders, they're playing well. You can never tell. They can get hot there for a while, and thank goodness they beat the Blue Jackets here tonight 4-1. But when I saw Son here in Chicago to get the ring, a little bit sad. Hell of a player. That guy was a great player.
He's only going to get better. You know, I, in fairness to him, I think he looked around at some of the young talent in Columbus and certainly didn't figure they'd be as bad as they were. He knew they weren't going to be as good as the Blackhawks, I'm sure, but he surely didn't figure they were going to be this big of a mess. And you talk about Chicago, and again, you said quasi-dynasty. I wouldn't even put the qualifier on it, and that's not easy for me as a Wings fan to say, but I would say dynasty. I mean, you have to. 3 Stanley Cups in 5 years. However, something I sometimes get accused of being a bitter Wings fan is when I comment on the fan base there, and set the record straight. I'll believe whatever you tell me on this, but the way that everyone has really kind of spilled out of the woodwork the last couple of years, a lot of bandwagoning, or is everybody in town, have they really been there all along and just suffered through the thick and the thin?
Since the first Stanley Cup win in 2010, there's a lot of bandwagons, but that's going to happen because it was about 10 years ago when Mr. Wirtz, Bill Wirtz, was running the. You'd get 7,000 people there to watch a very flat performance, game after game, year after year. There was absolutely no hype, no promotion, no nothing. He wouldn't even put the games on television.
Right.
How do you grow your sports? By putting it into an incubator. But that was his style. John, on the other hand, is a great promoter. I worked with John at the Cubs. He's one of the best sports marketers I've ever seen in my life. And, he was with Jim Hendry at the Cubs, and they did very well. They always had big crowds. And when the Cubs were going to be sold by Sam Zell, Kenny was going to be the new team president, so John was going to be out. Unfortunately, a guy who did all that for the Cubs for all those years was out. And then Mr. Wirtz died, and Rocky called him. And what a pairing that was. Everything from that point turned into gold. When Savard was out, Quenneville was in. Dale Palin was out, Dan Bowman Jr. was in. They started building these pieces. Everybody was a perfect fit. How often does that come through your door as a hockey owner, a baseball owner, a football? It's once in a lifetime. And the Blackhawks have always maintained a superiority in all those levels. They sell out. Their recognition's at all-time high. Fan base couldn't have been any bigger than it's ever been. Everybody, you walk into a store, walk into a drugstore, you see Blackhawks material. It's really something how that's, blossomed. Yeah, there's a lot of bandwagon people, but that's okay. You know why? Because they support their team. Hopefully, when the Hawks go a little flat someday, they'll still be around. But you know how fans are. They call them fickle, right? That's right.
And your point about TV is very well taken because the inexplicable refusal to put the games on local TV all those years was just that is something that's going to help dry out a fan base as well. I have noted that in fairness that's got to be a contributing factor. But it's interesting about Joel Quenneville because a name that came up a little bit earlier, Joe Torre, it almost kind of strikes me kind of the same thing because in terms of Quenneville, I think back on some of his playoff mishaps against my Detroit Red Wings, and I kind of smile looking back on those things. But Joe Torre was never successful as a manager until he got in the right spot there with the Yankees. Is there a little bit of that with Quenneville that he'd been obviously a very good coach for a long time, but strange as it sounds now, he had the rap of can't win the big one, and here we are 3 Stanley Cups later.
Yeah, when he left, I think it was in Colorado before he made his migration to Chicago, and no one really knew at that point in time what kind of coach Quenneville was. He was just a guy that we picked up from their team, is the custom here in Chicago. And but over the course of time, this reminded me of a lot of the times when Doug Collins was fired by the Chicago Bulls. And they brought in a guy who was a CBA coach, named, Phil Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
He came in. He was an assistant. There's something about the psyche or the Quenneville has poise. He has a very good way about him. He is a calming influence, and that's a very tough game. A lot of ups and downs, but the players look to him for strength. He's very Torre-like. He's quiet. You've never seen him lose his cool. I liked it about him. That's what I liked about Joe Torre. The guy just wins, and there's not a lot of fanfare. He doesn't pound his chest. He doesn't brag a lot. You don't see him out at bars. You don't see him on commercials. The guy works. He's like Lou Gehrig, just a quiet, hard-working coach. And I can't say enough about this guy. I hope the Hawks will keep him for a long, long time, as they did with Phil Jackson, and that fell apart. But I like his style. I do, and I think people in Chicago favor him over any other Blackhawks coach. Maybe 50 years ago with my dad, they had a guy named Billy Ray.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what Mr. Wirtz did? He fired Billy Ray with a note under the door on the road. That's how they fired Billy Ray. So, those days are over. But you look at the father and the son. What a distinction between the two management styles. Rocky will do anything to improve his team, where Bill was just very happy just watching the game, 7,000 people, and nobody but those 7,000 liked him. And he can live with that. Funny, isn't it? Can you see Jerry Jones doing that?
No.
Or Mark Cuban? You can't do it. So, not that I didn't want to see Mr. Wirtz, die, but that was the making of the Blackhawks.
And a lot of people point that out. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's kind of sad on a human level that it takes something like that, but there is a very real cause and effect. I mean, it doesn't make you callous to not note the truth there. I think it's just, as you indicated, fairly obvious that that's the case and that they've benefited from this new ownership. The other thing I like to ask about with the Blackhawks, too, is, when you get to sort of the yin and yang of positive and negative. We touched on this a little bit before with Patrick Kane, but the two megastar forwards on the team here, you've got Kane, who, again, with his issues, somebody who, again, with the 3 Stanley Cups, really could have been, I think, the face of this generation of American hockey, but somebody who, again, just is not, I think, suited to be pushed in a public kind of way with commercials and everything else, even before this, with all the controversy and chaos that's been around him, but also Jonathan Toews, who, it's funny, we do an annual listing every summer with the FDH Lounge of the top players in the NHL, and for the first time last year, in terms of guys you'd start a franchise with, we put Jonathan Toews above Sidney Crosby at number 1. So is that something in town there? I mean, I know there's a lot of partisans who would probably agree, but among the more rational kind of, intellectually honest fans there, is there a widespread sense, basically, that he has sort of become the overall player of this generation in the NHL?
Jonathan Toews personifies Blackhawk Nation. No one's done that in years and years. 50 years ago, the Blackhawks had a very stoic player by the name of Stan Mikita. They had a very fiery player, fiery, a great scorer, blonde, handsome, scored like crazy, but he had domestic, problems, a little bit like Kane. That was Bobby Hull. Bobby Hull was as good a player, but he would never, ever. They made him an alternate captain for 1 year in 1968. After that, he was not a leader, not at all, and he was outspoken. And he had a guy like Mikita who just existed, but he led. He was a great assist maker. He made his teams good. He made Bobby Hull great because of the fact that he sacrificed the puck for Bobby, and Bobby turned it over. He scored. So good chemistry. But when Bobby Hull elected not to stay with the Blackhawks, Mr. Wirtz exiled him, much like Bartlett Giamatti did with Pete Rose. He was never welcomed back in anything with Blackhawks, ever, until John McDonough. So, it seems like the past repeats itself. I think that Jonathan is our number 1. Patrick is my new Theo Fleury, and what to do with him. If you trade him now, you may not get full value for him.
No.
Where's the equilibrium? what does Quenneville do now? I don't think it's so much of a team problem as much as it is Quenneville's problem, because he's on a roll with them every day. So what does Joel do now?
That's a good point. And because when you look at the damage that the salary cap has already done, to trade Patrick Kane is to take a step backwards to where you're no longer necessarily in that top tier, at least in the short term, because of the explosiveness that he gives you. So that's interesting. And I have to say, again, I've never heard anyone draw that parallel before with Mikita and Hall and the present-day duo, but very well explained by you, because I see the parallel very clearly now that you kind of set it up there. And as you said, it's fascinating. History repeats itself, and there are always, I know, a lot of fascinating stories coming out of the world of Chicago sports, and we definitely look forward to catching up with you subsequently as these things happen, regardless of sport, Gerry. It's been a real pleasure to have you in the FDH Lounge today, sir. Thank you very much. Please don't be a stranger.
All right, Rick, thanks a lot for having me on. It's a pleasure talking sports with you.
I really appreciate it. I thank you so much, Gerry, for being on the program today, and thank you all, everybody, for tuning in.
As we bring the show to a close, we would like to extend our deepest gratitude to NBC, CBS, ABC, Fox, all Clear Channel affiliates, TNT, TBS, USA, UPN, Deadspin.com, YouTube.com, YTMND.com, MySpace.com, various blogs, Fox News, CNN, CNBC, MSNBC, IamBoard.com, Billboard.com, Google.com, ESPN, ESPN2, ESPN News, ESPN Classic, NBA TV, NFL Network, Sports Time Ohio, Athlon Magazine, Comedy Central, Cartoon Network, The Boomerang Channel, QVC, BET, The Spice Channel, Steno Notebooks, Manwich, Papermate Office Supplies, waitresses, strippers, bartenders, garbage men, janitors, microwave popcorn, the writers of The Office, Scrubs, Entourage, My Name is Earl, Oz, Metalocalypse and the Boondocks, Aquafina, and the Periodic Table of Elements.